I'm here to give you an update on Ordinance 190506 about nonconforming lots. This ordinance has had a long journey and lots of public testimony and opposition. For this ordinance, members of the public have had to come back and testify on this ordinance at 6 different hearings. Unfortunately, at that 6th hearing, on a 4-3 vote, the Joint Committee of Neighborhood Planning and Development and Housing Policy adopted a substitute ordinance that fails to address any of the concerns expressed by the public. I'm going to walk through this substitute ordinance to explain the changes and why they still fail to address the concerns expressed by the public. As I talked about in my first video, there are many 25-foot lots all over Kansas City. For all of these lots, this change means these lots could have a house built on them and it would only have to have a 10% side setback of 2.5 feet. Especially in older neighborhoods of Kansas City, many of these lots are neighboring zero lot line homes, which means these existing homes could see houses built 2.5 feet away, putting these homes at significant risk. At one of the many public hearings on this ordinance, the Deputy Director of City Planning and Development addressed the public's concern about the risk of damaging foundations of existing homes. Here's what she had to say.
Question. If there's two 25-foot wide lots and you have a 25-foot in the middle, yes, you can build on it. And to what happened in this situation, you do have to notify those property owners to let them know that you're coming in to do that construction, because depending, they have to be aware, because it is their responsibility to make sure that their properties are not relying on that middle property to hold up their ground or to whatever. So if they're using that property, if you will, to hold up their foundations, right, it's their responsibility to make sure that they're in good structural sound, not the property owner in the middle. And so,
in case you didn't catch that, the Deputy Director is saying that the homeowner of the existing zero lot line home is responsible for ensuring that their foundation is not damaged when a developer excavates right next to them. For any homeowner in Kansas City, that should be an incredibly concerning statement to hear from the Deputy Director. Before we get into the revised version of this ordinance, let's take a closer look at what our current law is and Ordinance 190506 as a whole. There are 2 sections of the Building and Development Code that Ordinance 190506 would change. The first change is to the nonconforming lots section. I've covered this portion of the code pretty thoroughly in my first video, so if you haven't seen that already, I would pause this video and go watch that first. Now, in that first video, I didn't really give much time to the second part of this ordinance, but in the revised version of the ordinance, it has become an important piece to understand. For this second change, it's important to understand the context of where this is taking place in the Zoning and Development Code. Let's first look at how our code is currently written. Within our Zoning and Development Code, we have different series. You can think of these as different chapters or subject categories. Within each series, there are different subsections. We are going to be looking at the 800 series, Terminology and Measurements, specifically at 88.820, Measurements and Exceptions. Under this section, there are several terms. Luckily, the one that is relevant to this ordinance is the first one, lot area. You'll see with this term, as is the case with all of the terms in this section, that we have a definition of the term and then any exceptions are listed. This exception under lot area has been the key point for this entire issue. This is the portion of the code City Planning and Development pointed to at the beginning to justify why developers could build on these 25-foot wide lots throughout the city. They took this portion of the code out of context and added meaning to it that was incorrect. Before we talk about how City Planning and Development wants to change this section, let's look at why this lot area exception is in place and how it works. So let's look at Brookside, where we have a number of good examples of why this exception for lot area is needed. With this first example, we're looking at a home that is in an area zoned R6. R6 requires a lot width of 50 feet, which this lot has, and a lot area of 6,000 square feet, which this lot does not have. Actually, these 10 homes here meet the lot width requirement, but are just shy of meeting the lot area requirement. I think we can all understand why in this circumstance these lots should have a lot area exception that would make these lots conforming. Another example are the areas of Brookside where the streets go outside of a grid format and have more curved roads. In this example here, we see another home that is zoned R6. Again, this lot meets the lot width requirements but does not meet the lot area requirement. Many of the homes around this are in a similar situation. But again, the current lot area exception makes the lots conforming to our code. When we look at the Brookside neighborhood and others like it, I think most people can understand and agree with the idea that these lots should be given a lot area exception, be considered conforming lots, and not be subject to the regulations of non-conforming lots. I can't stress that last point enough. The lot area exception in the code means that these lots are now considered conforming. That is a very important thing to understand as we continue to look at the revised version of Ordinance 190506. Now let's look at how this ordinance will change this lot area exception. There are two changes that City Planning and Development want to make to the lot area exception. The first change is to remove this verbiage from the measurements and exceptions section that only applied to lot area, and now make it an overall general exception to the lot and building standards in the 100 series. The second change is to add the words lot width. Both of these are major changes to what used to be just an exception for lot area that applied to lots like what we saw in Brookside. With these changes, all the lots we've been talking about that are under 30 feet wide would be considered conforming lots and would no longer be subject to regulations of non-conforming lots. There is one part of Ordinance 190506 that has been revised, and that revision is with the non-conforming lot section. But with the information we've just discussed with the lot area exception, it becomes apparent how this revision on non-conforming lots won't matter. With this new revision, City Planning and Development put in new setback requirements for existing buildings. If you've been following the history of this ordinance at all, you've heard staff state on multiple occasions that it's too difficult for them to regulate distance between buildings. So why is there now this complicated revision regulating distance between buildings? Well, because this entire section regulating non-conforming lots is irrelevant. With the change to the lot area exception, these tiny lots under 30 feet will be considered conforming, meaning staff never has to even worry about what's in the non-conforming section. This is consistent with how staff was applying the law before my BZA case in April, and this email from the manager of the Permits Division shows that. I just want to point out that an awful lot of changes to the code need to be made to match the staff's interpretation. It's pretty difficult to justify that staff's previous interpretation was at all accurate, especially when they're testifying that they were completely unaware of the non-conforming lot section.
So, but bottom line is this section of the code, frankly, we just weren't aware of it. I wasn't aware of it.
A number of neighborhood groups and organizations, including my neighborhood association, have expressed concern about this ordinance. Kansas City is tired of how development has been done to neighborhoods and not with neighborhoods. This city is desperate for affordable housing, but instead we are told that we need to give away tax incentives and let big and expensive houses be built on tiny lots, and eventually it will benefit the rest of us. This trickle-down development is the same fairy tale as trickle-down economics. It benefits the few at the expense of the many. In the last election, many of our council members campaigned on protecting neighborhoods, making City Hall accountable to the public, and making sure future development is done in a way that the city wants. Well, all three of those issues are front and center with Ordinance 190506. Approval of this ordinance will send a loud signal that it is still business as usual. This ordinance can still be changed. We can still avoid the mistakes that other cities like Nashville and Austin have made with gentrifying their neighborhoods with expensive houses being built on tiny lots for the benefit of developers' profits and at the expense of our most vulnerable residents. The lot consolidation section protects against this and gives neighborhoods a voice in development projects. Even if the council is going to get rid of this section, they should make sure that the new setback requirements truly protect the safety of existing residents and are actually enforced. Please contact your council members and encourage them to listen to and protect neighborhoods like they pledged to do so in our last election. Ask them to respect the public's concerns and reject Ordinance 190506. We need your help to keep City Hall accountable. Please visit www.ordinance190506.com for more information on Ordinance 190506 and steps you can take right now to encourage City Council to oppose this ordinance.